let's go ahead and get into our first ever USL Super League final, as it is a Florida derby. We have Tampa Bay Sun hosting Fort Lauderdale United. The Sun take down the Trinity 2-1 in what we thought was going to be the most exciting playoff matchup of the weekend, but not to be outdone by a 120th, 119th minute winner from Fort Lauderdale to down Carolina Ascent. While the conversation should start with the Sun because chronological, we do need to discuss the game winner for Fort Lauderdale. Many people, including myself, saw offside from the very beginning, but there were some photos going around that showed that maybe there was an Ascent player keeping Locklear on side. I just want to know your opinions on that first and foremost. John.
I can't remember who posted the very MS Paint breakdown of the play on Blue Sky with like body outlines and lines across the 18-yard box. Based on that, based on the law and a very strict reading, I think I would give that as being onside and let the goal stand. But in a league without VAR, I don't know. Sometimes you just got to roll with the punches. It's tough, but yeah, that's on for me.
Phil?
Yeah, it was one of those where in real time, I thought surely off, and then as I saw it, it's that far side player for Ascent that just seems to keep a trailing leg, like maybe keeping her onside for what was a very dramatic winner. And I would like to, revisit what we said towards the end of the Super League season on this very podcast, which is Ascent have already proven themselves to be the best team in the league. Whatever happened in the playoffs can't take away from that. And this shows just how fine the margins are when it comes to the playoffs. Like, you can have just an absolutely amazing season, run away with it, and in the end, a single moment can knock you out. So, credit to Fort Lauderdale for the fight. And I do think she's just onside.
Yeah, my general rule of thumb is if there's no VAR and you have to pull out like Zapruder film to try to prove your points, you just go with the ref's decision. That's my go-to. I think what really sold that it might have been offside to a lot of people is that every single Ascent player stopped. Every single one stopped. Goalkeeper didn't even think about diving. None of the defenders even thought about tracking back. Locklear was the only one that even thought about taking the shot. Heck, even half of the Fort Lauderdale players just stood there thinking that she was off. The play looked off until, well, you get again Zapruder film that shows maybe she was onside. Good on her for taking her chance. It's an awful way to end your season. You feel awful for the Ascent, but the whole thing that you tell your kids, if you're a coach from when they're 5 years old up until high school, college, now professionals, you go till you hear a whistle. This is a prime example that every coach should circle and be like, this is why. It could cost you in the most crucial of times. But I just kind of want to talk. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this match as well, because the way we're kind of talking is that maybe Fort Lauderdale didn't deserve this, but especially when you look at the 70th to 90-minute mark, it was Fort Lauderdale's game. Carolina looked the second best team with as direct as Fort Lauderdale was. Carolina Ascent did not really seem to have an answer. That said, in the first half, the Ascent were causing chaos with the amount of pressing they were doing. They were really causing Fort Lauderdale issues. Is this a story of Carolina didn't take their chances when they came, or is it just, Fort Lauderdale weathered the storm and came out on top?
I think to an extent, the Ascent came out as the hotter team. But when you look at the 120 minutes as a whole, they only got to 0.8 XG. I thought the way that Fort Lauderdale set up that midfield and was able to manipulate McCain and Daria Rajiv, they limited those passing patterns that the Ascent are so reliant on, where they can get Mia Corbin going between the lines, use her as that hub, and then move forward into the final third. To me, that felt like a really well-designed setup from Tyrone Mears in this game. And some of the way that Fort Lauderdale attacks is very feast and famine. It's a lot of those kind of longer balls into the channels, see what you can get from Gordon and Hamid. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it can be a bit ugly. So they trusted that game plan. They wrote it out. I know the natural tendency is let's focus on the big call at the end. But I think if you're Fort Lauderdale, you feel good about how you executed here. You feel like you deserved to advance.
It felt like a game that emphasized, you mentioned the pressing, Kaylor, early on from Carolina, and it did feel like a game where both teams kind of showed what got them to this point, right? Carolina with this relentless pressure and exactly like what you saw early on, and Fort Lauderdale with being able to weather the pressure, find their moments, and in this crucial match they were able to make the most of it. I do think there's something, I don't know, there's something poetic about a guy like Tyrone Mears like seeing out this kind of scrappy 120-minute winner. Like, it just feels very English in a very specific way, like something you see in a championship playoff final or something like that. And yeah, it was, I will say, in terms of drama, exactly what you want to see, if you're the Super League, because that's a lot of there was a lot of excitement generated from this game and a lot of conversation, which ultimately is part of what you're trying to do too.
So what about the second half of this final with the Tampa Bay Sun downing of Dallas Trinity? The Trinity get an early goal. The Sun equalized from Flint from the spot. Second half happens. Giamona gets what ends up being the game winner. The Sun, survive what the Trinity were throwing at them, because the Trinity has a lot to go forward. The Sun see it out at home. I mean, this felt like a very, very even matchup the entire night. I think there's a way where the Trinity feel like maybe they're a little hard done by to not at least push it to extra time. But you also have to give a lot of credit to the Sun for being strong defensively and sticking to their guns.
Yeah, and I think this was another game really where you said it yourself. The Sun stuck to their guns. They trusted the fact that Natasha Flint can dominate in the midfield, and I thought she was tremendous in this game, kind of doing like hold up number 10 things for a lot of the time. And the way that they used her, they let they let Jade Moore advance up from the pivot to kind of partner with her between the lines. Then you get the second wave into Giamona and Nacello. It's very intentional. It's what we've seen all season long from this team. Denise Schulte-Brown has them playing so physically, and I think that just wore Dallas down over the course of the match. And credit to Trinity for keeping the effort up. I thought they looked strong at the end. It's tough when you go out like this in a playoff game. But yeah, Tampa Bay, much like Fort Lauderdale, I feel like they executed and they had the clearer game plan of how they wanted to go at this one.
I think Tampa Bay's thrived on like gumming up the works against teams that can really attack offensively and really get after you. And they've gotten a lot of results this season in just making those teams work a lot harder than they're used to for chances. And I think in this one, just limiting the amount that Dallas was able to threaten in front of goal it ended up being almost like a math problem of, if we can keep them below like 10 decent looks, we can probably get out of this one. And holding them to just what was it, like 6 shots across the whole 90 minutes? That's really impressive from Tampa Bay. And I think it's nice to see teams using what got them to this point to, like you said, Kaylor, like sticking to their guns and finding their way to the final by virtue of the stuff that's gotten them into the playoffs in the first place.
The one thing from the Sun, and I'm trying to remember a date off the top of my head. I know which match it was, but I don't remember the opponent. It was the first ever red card in league history, whatever date that was, whatever match that was.
Yeah.
We talked about, yes, Jordan Listro, but I don't remember who they were playing. I can't remember which match it was. But I remember us distinctly talking about how the Suns showed us something in that match that we hadn't seen from them, which was, like rock hard defensive solidity, where they sat back, absorbed pressure, because everything they were built off of, which is press the crap out of goal kicks and just try to intercept every ball they can. They sat back and really defended in a well-structured kind of a like 4-4-1 shape that entire time, and just sat in and absorbed and absorbed and absorbed. And while they didn't quite get that defensive in this match, they showed defensive solidity that we didn't really see in the first half of the season. And it's really cool to see a team grow like that over the season.
Well, not to be the Ryan of this episode, but I did look it up, and that game in which Tampa Bay Sun won 1-0 despite playing roughly 75 minutes down to 10 men was against Dallas. So yeah, bit of a blueprint here then maybe for seeing out a game against this Trinity side.
And we're kind of framing this as if Dallas like had a barrage of opportunities. They had six shot attempts in this game. Like that's nothing, and that speaks to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's really when I'm like talking about just like how well they were like solidly and how they were able to withstand the pressure. Dallas has arguably the best midfield in the league, and they kept them from doing their thing. Like the Sun midfield withstood the pressure of Dallas's midfield, which I think if you were to look at the first team, right, your first team all USL, your second team all USL that dropped today, a lot of people seem to be thinking that maybe the Trinity had a strong presence there, and the Sun withstood it and were able to stand firm before they even got tested. And I think that's really impressive out of the Sun. So previewing,
and to be fair, just very briefly, to be fair, overcoming any team that has someone named Cameron Lancaster in a semifinal in the USL, statistically speaking, it just doesn't happen that often that you beat that team. So, yeah.
Cameron Lancaster goes into Tampa Bay in a playoff game, and somehow it doesn't hurt them again. So, how about this final? This has been a closely contested match. 3 draws, 1 win. The 1 win being the most recent matchup to the Tampa Bay Sun, 2-0. But everything else has been 1-1, 2-2, 1-1. This is one of the few matchups that 3 of them came in the second half split. They only played 1 time in the first half. So these teams have played each other in this iteration of these teams. It's not like they played 3 first half matches. They or first half of the season matches. They've kind of changed. They have seen this version of each other. What are we kind of seeing here? Because conventional wisdom tells you the Sun should win this. Because as you said, John, Fort Lauderdale is feast or famine. That's kind of what they are. But they were supposed to lose to Carolina. Carolina was easily the best team in the league, and they handled it well and came out on top for a good reason. Is there a world where Fort Lauderdale comes out as the champions?
I mean, I think it's really easy to see how it can happen because the lightning in the bottle effect of Hamid and Gordon, the movement we saw from Locklear in the semifinal was unbelievable. They've got 3 players who are so good about combining and making these complementary runs that really force defenders to ask questions of themselves in how they're going at certain situations. And I think the way that Fort Lauderdale kind of set themselves up, they've got a base with pretty deep fullbacks a lot of the time and a double pivot a lot of the time. That means they're steady. That means they're not going to give up those dribbling opportunities for Nacello and Giamona. If they can stick to that game plan and execute like mistake-free soccer, that's the formula. Is Tampa Bay the favorite? I think so, but it's very easy to imagine the scenario where Fort Lauderdale wins this thing.
Oh no, this is just screaming penalties to me for whatever reason. Like I feel like both teams are going to be a little bit cagey. Fort Lauderdale in particular, like maybe not feeling, because they were underdogs, maybe they're feeling a little bit like, we got to take advantage of our opportunity being on this stage. And So I think both teams might take a while to like feel each other out, and then we get a scoring draw and eventually penalties. But either way, I think it'll be a hell of a final and a bit of a chess match between these two teams.
So obviously the Sun are going to be at home, right? And you're expecting, honestly, one of the most beautiful venues in all of U.S. soccer to be sold out. I really hope they do the riverboat entrance again. Like, please let the players walk off from the boat. Please, we need that as a society. But you expect the atmosphere obviously be on the Sun side. You expect, these super influential players. You expect a Flint to, do her thing and just being super strong up top. You expect Orcus to continue to stay strong as their goalkeeper. Hendricks has been one of the best center backs in the league. Listro has been one of the best, arguably the best midfielder in the league, according to some. You expect the Sun to be able to dominate this match. Is what has to go wrong for them to lose this match? Because we've seen the blueprint. We've seen them win 2-0 in their most recent matchup. This feels like it should be a Sun victory.
There are matches where Tampa Bay feels like they are overextending in the press at times, and there are games where their model of trying to use Flint as that kind of anchor player between the lines, then feeding into that second wave on the wings, it just doesn't connect because it is a little bit based on the long ball and those longer initiations that aren't as much of a sure thing. So if Fort Lauderdale comes in here, has a very strong second ball structure and is making those scenarios hard to execute, suddenly the formula is a little bit less successful for the Sun. And like I said, it just takes one moment for Hamid to get loose, do what she does so well in one-on-one situations. Again, like I think Tampa Bay probably wins this game, but it's a very real possibility based on what we've seen across the 4 matchups already that they don't come through.
I guess for me, and I'm just looking at just the attacking, essentially 4 now, especially when you take into consideration Locklear and what she did in this most recent match. Hamid, Gordon, McCain. You can't forget about adding McCain in this situation. And now Locklear being added to the fray. If you're thinking that there's any team that can outgun you, it is Fort Lauderdale. I don't see a world where the Sun sit back and defend on home turf. They're going to try to take it to Fort Lauderdale, maybe leaving them a little bit more exposed. Phil, I'm with you here. I think at the very minimum, this is going to extra time. Maybe we get a game winner in extra time. I'm not going to just boldly predict penalties, but I do think this feels like one of those cagey matches that 1-1s into extra time.
Yeah. I don't
know. In which case you trust Orcus.
Yes, massively. So I guess predictions. John, who do you have?
Tampa Bay, and I'll call it 2-1 in regulation.
Bill?
I'll just to be contrarian, I'll say Fort Lauderdale on penalties. Tyrone Mears, champagne bath, Super League title in his inaugural season.
I want to go with the Sun in extra time. I think it's going to be a 2-1 win for the Sun. That said, I mean, Fort Lauderdale already showed that they can take down giants, and they just do not care. So,
and we have Olivier Giroux in the chat saying that Fort Lauderdale is going to take it. So, I don't know what else anyone needs.
That's all I needed. That's all I needed to know.